Hey everybody, thank you so much for clicking on this video. Today, we are going to talk about the presidential fitness test with the help of my co-host here. She's going to leave in like 5 seconds. So recently in the US, there have been talks of reinstating the presidential fitness test. I believe there was actually an executive order that put it back into place. And in today's video, we're going to break down not only what the presidential fitness test is, but we're also going to talk about what might actually be a better test or implementation in terms of improving kids' health in the country. But before we jump into it, if this is your first time here, my name's Justina. I'm a personal trainer based out of New York City who loves educating people on the basics of how to move their body to preserve their long-term health. And I believe that that should start in childhood. So if all that sounds good to you, I would love for you to stick around, hit that subscribe button. I'm trying to hit 100K by the end of the year. And if I am not enough of a reason to subscribe, this long lady over here should be. Anyway, let's jump into it. So the presidential fitness test was established in the 1950s as a way to measure which children could compete with the Soviet Union. There was a general notion that kids and Americans in general were getting too soft, and there was a fear in administrations that we wouldn't have strong enough soldiers to fight other countries. So the test was never really about improving the health of children or teaching them long-term movement routines, but more of a way to weed out weak kids and recruit strong ones. Now, you might be wondering, what was on this test? I was actually still in school when this test was being administered. In 2013, it was taken out of schools under President Obama because that administration thought that there should be something a little bit more health-centric and less just like performance-centric. Unfortunately, from what I have read, there wasn't really a great like replacement or alternative that was more health centric, but we all know that the Obamas got a lot of pushback in their administration for wanting to make kids healthier, but we would leave it at that. So anyway, back to my personal experience. I do remember the test, and I remember being absolutely traumatized by it, even though I was a fairly athletic child. Like, I wasn't necessarily a sports star. I played a little bit of softball. I tried out different sports, but I was a dancer, so it's not like I was totally uncoordinated. But the test still really did make me feel like shit as more of a introverted, not cool kid. So imagine if you were a kid who wasn't athletic at all. Personally, again, I just found that it was more of a breeding ground for bullying weak kids rather than teaching kids about health. Now, those are just my anecdotes, but let's actually look at the curriculum. So first was the 1 mile run. And honestly, this was the worst part for me. There was no warm up, there was no guidance, just go run a mile as fast as you can. And if you're one of the last kids back, you're getting picked on. And look, I'm not of the mindset that like we should baby kids and like every kid needs to be coddled, but I also think we should be thinking about how this makes kids feel. And once again, just having kids go out and run a mile, it's not teaching them anything, it's not instilling anything in them about how to improve their health or commit to healthy habits. It's just putting naturally athletic kids on a pedestal and making other kids feel like shit. Next up were sit-ups, and this test was basically as many sit-ups as possible in a minute. And this was meant to gauge your core strength. Personally, I think, especially at that age, there's probably better ways to measure core strength. Maybe a plank is something better. But once again, there was never any education about this. It was just like, hey, lay down on your back, someone's gonna hold your feet, we're gonna set a timer, and you're going to do as many sit-ups as you can. There was never anything educational about it. Then we had push-ups or pull-ups. Now, from what I recall and what I could find online from credible sources, I think... Yes? Okay. So I think either the teacher or the administration got to choose between them, or maybe like the kids got to choose between them. To be quite honest, I don't ever remember doing a pull-up or seeing anyone do a pull-up, so I just remember the push-ups. What I do remember is that boys were supposed to do push-ups on their toes and girls were supposed to do girl push-ups, aka on their knees. So like, what a great way to just instill in women in childhood that like, men are strong and women are weak. Obviously, I also understand the fact that like boys or men are naturally broader. I've talked about training differences between men and women in a whole nother video if you want to check that out. But in my opinion, I think the better option here for children and adults, whether you're a man or a woman, boy or girl, anything in between, is just to elevate the hands on a surface like a bench. You're going to have a lot better time crossing over down to the floor by working from that full plank and just shortening the lever rather than working from the knees. But once again, this isn't necessarily coming from a place of health. It's coming from a place of, we just want to see who's strong right now now so we can recruit them in the future. And then from what I have read online about kids and people who actually did have to do the pull-ups, it was actually boys did pull-ups and girls did just a dead hang. So once again, we're teaching women from a young age that they are meant to be small and meek and weak, while the boys are the strong ones. Then we've got the sit and reach, which is a flexibility test, which is actually the only thing I remember being good at since I danced growing up. But I think my main problem again with this is like there's no education about it. Like, why are we doing a sit and reach test? What's the importance of having more flexible hamstrings? How do we actually increase that range of motion? How do we then implement strength work to make the hamstrings stronger so that when you're trying to pass this flexibility test, you don't pull your hamstring? Instead, we just do this test one day and then the next day I'm back to getting the shit beat out of me with like a field hockey stick from the girls who are actually good at it. And then finally we have the shuttle run, which I truly don't ever remember doing, but maybe I've just blocked it out of my memory. And this is essentially where you have two cones and you'll run to one, tap it, and then run back. This is more of an agility and speed drill, and I actually think it's probably one of the better tests in the presidential fitness test simply because it mimics play the most. And I think at the end of the day, one of the most important things with kids and movement is reestablishing the excitement and the fun in it so that they actually can stick to it long term. One of the things that I talk about with my fully grown adult clients a lot is the best way to keep consistency is to find stuff that you actually enjoy doing. So that being said, that's kind of where my knowledge stops. I could come up with a bunch of different things I think kids should be doing, but I don't have the experience or quite frankly the education there. So we're going to transition into somebody who does. So Sam, why don't you introduce yourself to everybody?
All right. My name is Samantha Butts, and I am a kinesiologist and strength and conditioning coach on Vancouver Island in BC, Canada. I did my undergraduate studies at UBC in Vancouver with the inclination, which I think most kin people do and have, to move into physical therapy or occupational therapy or chiropractic or massage therapy. That was always kind of the end goal for me. And I think it was mostly just because that's ingrained in you early on, that you have to continue to go forward in order to have impact in this industry. So that's kind of where I went into it. But I realized pretty soon after that taking that next step was actually kind of deterring me from how I wanted to approach stepping into this industry and kind of leading from the front in terms of health and wellness.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about the demographic that you work with now that we're going to kind of like pick apart in this video?
Cool. Yeah. So essentially, I kind of always knew along this ride that I really wanted to work with youth in athletic performance. I had really wonderful experiences through sport growing up, but I bumped my athletic career before it even began when I broke my leg playing high school basketball.
Damn.
Coach was absolutely livid with me, but I just never came back. I went through physical rehab, and it was absolutely terrible. It was bands and clamshells and then get back on the field and go play. And I never came back with confidence. I never came back with any sort of resemblance of the strength that I needed to have at that point, which I was now 16, 17 years old, and I was falling behind my peers. So for me, I kind of always knew that youth training and youth development was where I wanted to go. And I just was like kind of waiting for the best opportunity to get into that. And almost 2 years ago now, it was September last 2 years ago, that I found a job opening at Speed Mechanics, which is in Victoria, BC here. And they were largely working with youth in the training and athletic development performance world. So I threw in that application and hopped on board, and soon after got my SNC certification, and have been just loving this space ever since. It really is like, for me, it's like the whole purpose, the whole point of being in this industry for me is to getting to this place. So I've now just spent the last 2 years really dedicating my practice and my learning and my life to trying to build my capacity as a coach in the youth S&C world.
Awesome. I worked with kids in like a theater setting for over 10 years, and there is just something so rewarding about like working with that demographic. Yeah, that's a whole topic for another video. But Why don't we kind of shift into, I know that obviously you're Canadian, as you said, so you didn't necessarily have the presidential fitness test that I had growing up, and I know you probably had something different, but I would love to hear your thoughts on the American presidential fitness test, just from like your perspective, and then we'll kind of shift into what you think would actually be some great ways to measure performance and health with kids. So why don't we just start with like, what are your thoughts when I sent that over?
So immediately you can't, I don't know, I haven't like been reading into any of this or like in the heart of this for a while. Obviously, I'm like super old now. So
Same.
so when came back to this and I started reading into it this week, I was like my blood started to like boil. Like my skin started to crawl a little bit. I was like, oh my God. Like you're gonna have like a panic attack. Yeah, so like I think the main issue with tests like this is that it's the same issue that we see in standardized academic testing. You're giving an opportunity for the people that are naturally gifted, and you are now telling 75% of the population that they are inadequate in their fitness and that they are not athletic and that they are just not as good as their peers when it comes to sport and athleticism. And there's such a problem with that. This is like so bad.
Yeah.
Like in a world and in a country, and not just the US, Canada as well, where our main causes of mortality are like controllable diseases and main disabilities are like obesity and like it's absurd to me that we would issue a standardized measurement of fitness here that is just going to separate our youth, and it's going to put you in two buckets. It's going to put you in the athlete bucket and it's going to put you in the unathletic bucket. And literally to this day, I'm 31 and I still have friends, mostly women, as we would imagine. I still have friends that use the word unathletic, that they are unathletic, and that is their life. That is their whole MO, and they're going to stand by it. They're not gym people. They're not weightlifting people. They're not very fit. They don't run. Yeah. I just don't do that. I don't like that. And like this is learned behavior, like the thought that there is a type of person that engages in physical activity and strength building concepts and sport and play, that there's a type of person that does that is absurd to me. We all need to be engaging in these activities. And I think that tests like this, like the presidential fitness test, but also all standardized fitness tests that we are issuing in our youth, they're setting this expectation that you're either in it or you're not. And that's that. Like, where's the follow-up? Like, what happens to the 75% of kids that are deemed inadequate? What's the plan for them to encourage them into movement and strength training and athleticism and sport and play? What's the plan? Because is it at the end of that just like, we got athletes and we got non-athletes, go enjoy your life? Like, is that it?
Unfortunately, it is. At least in my experience, maybe there were better public schools out there and, whatever. But, it's so interesting to hear you talk about that, like splitting us into two buckets of like athletic and non-athletic, because even as someone who danced growing up and I like casually played sports, I wasn't great at them, but like I was definitely more in that unathletic bucket based on these tests, but simply because I had no tools given to me to actually excel at these tests. It was just like one day you do them and then the next day you're back to getting the shit beat out of you in field hockey. I don't know. Like it was awful. But a lot of my demographic of clients are women, usually in their 30s, who now like things are starting to hurt and they're like, oh, maybe I should do something about this. But I was put in that unathletic bucket growing up. And so I've always stayed away from the gym and movement and things like that. So I agree with you 100%. So why don't you tell me, with your experience with youth development, because I've always said, like, if I could go back and like live another life, I would love to be like a gym teacher and like learn about how to get kids into strength and conditioning. Oh, dude, I would love it. But that time has passed. Another life, my next life. But anyway, how would you approach this if you were designing curriculum based on your experience with youth athletes?
I think we overcomplicate this, like we're like, Oh, we have these kids, and there's females and there's males and everything in between. And there's, 9-year-olds to 18-year-olds, and everybody is hormonally and physically developing at their own stage. So it gets really complicated because when you try to create a curriculum that fits, or we make it complicated because when you try to create a curriculum that fits all of these people, right? We start to think that, like, you know what, it's too complicated, we can't do this, so let's just not do it. And I think that that's kind of where we go. Like, I think the
Mhm.
simplified version of this is like, we just want kids to be putting the reps in across the spectrum of play and foundational strength and movement literacy and coordination and sprinting and jumping, and like all of these things will naturally develop if the kids are being exposed to them on a regular basis, and that's it. Right. So, like, if we're talking about creating a program or a curriculum, teach them the basic fundamentals of movement patterning. Do the kids know how to squat? Do they know how to hinge? Can they lunge? Can they control their torso when they lunge? That one's fascinating to me.
Oh
That one's
yeah.
it's amazing, right? Like, do they have basic core strength? Because at the end of the day, like, kids' core strength is going to be a huge piece of this. Their rotational capacity, their ability to hold their body in place when they are exposed to forces outside and inside of their body. Like, core strength is a huge piece of it. Movement literacy is built from just moving. So, like, how are you supporting that? I find there's a little tangent, but when I ask the kids now what their gym day to day looks like they might say, oh, like, we played ping pong, but like you didn't really have to. So if you didn't want to play ping pong or you didn't want to play tennis, like you could just like hang out, and like not really do anything. And I'm like, huh, okay. So here we are again, like we have movement where you have kids that are inclined to move and they are naturally going that way. And then you have kids that are not, and they're naturally avoiding it. And like, how do we start to piece that together so that everybody's engaged in activity and learning through movement? Creating that inclusive environment is so critical. So finding ways to like bridge the gap between those that are more developed versus not is a really key piece of this. We play a game at our gym. We run this huge membership program at the gym where like kids can just sign up for strength or speed sessions throughout the week. There's a whole bunch of them. But we tend to start every single session, regardless, with like at least 5 minutes of gameplay. And our go-to game of the gym is handball because handball requires the least amount of like sporting skill. Like there's
Yeah.
throwing, there's running, there's moving around, there's changing direction. But soccer's pretty high in terms of like movement coordination for the feet, yeah. And basketball, I'm not very good at basketball. I can't get that ball in the hoop. Like there's some like limitations to some of those things. So handball is generally what we play. And we do things like make constraints of like every kid on your team has to touch the ball before you can score, 10 full passes before you can score, or whatever it is. Like we make these little constraints. And what all that does is create an environment where now everybody on the turf is going to have an opportunity to play. And that encourages confidence, it gets people moving, it keeps them included in the game. Whereas, at school when they play dodgeball, they probably just stood in the corner and let them get hit so they could go sit off on the side. We want all these games. We want dodgeball, we want tennis, we want to encourage this, but when it comes to PE, like the whole purpose of physical education is to provide this like foundational, like active and strength space where kids are learning the bare minimum of how to move and feel fit and strong and active so that they can catapult from that later. Right. And that's kind of what we try to do with the gym. Like we're trying to create this opportunity that facilitates movement literacy in a fun and supportive environment that keeps the positive experience with movement at the most important piece of what we do. Because if they walk away with a negative experience, man, kids are very, very influential. Like that's it. That could
Oh
be
yeah.
it. One strike, one bad experience, and you might lose a kid to engaging in a physical activity experience, right? That's huge. That's a huge loss. So like this is kind of the goal. We're trying to take the pressure off of it, and base our development off of protocols and methods like the long-term athletic development protocol, which is like, we start in just a basic like movement literacy, active engagement, pre-puberty, just getting kids moving and feeling good in their bodies and learning how to move within environments and building them up through the fundamentals of learning to train and training to train and training for performance and all of these things. But the heart of that is just play. It's just play.
Those kids are very lucky to have you, Sam.
So I would love to hear your experience, if you can remember it, of PE class or gym class as a kid. Did you grow up with the presidential fitness test? Were you scarred from having to run the mile? Are you from another country that maybe has other tests that they implement in gym class that you find are beneficial? Most of the clientele that I work with are not people who were super athletic growing up, and they've had to really understand how to move for their health and enjoy it later in life. So I think this is an incredibly important conversation to have to make sure that the people of the future are better able to take care of their health and enjoy it along the way. Once again, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future videos, and I will see you all in the next one.
It felt like a